Alright, hi, how's it going? This is my Toy Story 4 review. I noticed that all the, the cool cats, all the top players haven't really been, talking about it yet, but they're probably going to be posting soon. So I just thought I should jump on the gun and go ahead and give my review. I'm going to start off right on bat. By the way, this is spoiler free right now. It's spoiler free. As we all knew that there was no reason for a Toy Story 4 to exist at all. No one needed it, no one wanted it, and it probably shouldn't have existed, right? But even so, this was probably the best movie that it possibly could have been. It was a very, very entertaining movie. It was interesting. It had a very similar feel, if not better, from the previous movies. All the characters were interesting and honored what the original characters were. There was a lot of strong dynamics. Everything felt pretty natural. Oh, and another big part about this movie was that every single character was, well, almost, many characters were flawed, which is a really big aspect of a lot of, movies, especially like these, the newer, cash grab Disney sequels that they just want, as much money as humanly possible because they want to take over the world and, they're probably the secret society or whatever. But pretty much, every character was flawed and it felt like it. And every character had a little bit of growth. Sure, there were a lot of problems with this movie, and we'll get into those, but for the most part, I really enjoyed this movie. And also on top of that, it looks beautiful. It looks fantastic. I mean, there are just certain, depth of field shots and focus that are really interesting, and it's a really creative movie, especially like visually speaking. And there's a lot of, real detail to like the toys and like the world. It kind of feels like when you're watching it, you kind of feel like, wow, that looks real. Is that real? It kind of takes you, it's like it takes you a second to be like, oh wait, okay, no, that's not real. But yeah, it's really good in that regard. I think we're gonna get into spoiler territory now. So this is spoilers, just so everyone knows. So if you're sticking around for the spoiler section, everyone knows that the plot is pretty much something. Bonnie's new, Bonnie, the new kid or whatever for the toys, is going into first grade, and she's super scared, right? Just as all of us were. And then Woody sneaks into first grade with her, and then he helps her make a toy, like straight up make a toy. It's made of like a spork. His name's, I think, Forky. And he's like the funniest character probably, and he's actually interesting, and he also has development, which is weird for a funny character. And then also then pretty much Bonnie and her family go on like a road trip, and pretty much the entire movie is about making sure Forky understands that he's a toy and stuff. And finally, like, he tries to jump out the window, and then Woody goes to rescue him, and then Woody rescues him, and then Forky kind of starts to learn that he's a toy. He constantly is having this weird existential crisis because he thinks he's trash. And it's kind of funny, but it's kind of weird. Not gonna lie. But then, anyways, as he's about to return to Bonnie, he sees like a shop or whatever, and in the shop there's something that I guess was once Bo, who's the weird sheep. The sheep keeper lady from the first two movies, who also shows up at the beginning of this movie, and is on top of that, the opening of this movie is phenomenal. It's probably one of the best openings I've ever seen in many movies. It feels a lot like a Star Wars kind of vibed movie when it comes to the opening. It reels you in, it's interesting, it is immediate adventure, and there's also instantly there is character development, and it's really good. But anyways, pretty much he's like, that's probably where Bo is, and then he goes on that, and then he loses Forky, and then he has to get him back, and then Bo turns out to be like this really, basically she turns out to be Furiosa from Mad Max, and then, yeah, that's pretty much, and then, they get Forky back. Forky, ends up getting back with his, Bonnie or whatever, and then at the very end, Woody's kind of like, oh, I'm gonna stay with. So yeah, that was pretty much the whole story. It's pretty entertaining, and it feels like it naturally progresses from the last one. Less than like 3, because 3 was instantly immediate. Like, it answered the immediate question that everyone had from 1 and 2, which is what happens when they grow up, right? This movie's kind of more like, it feels natural in the sense of, yes, of course, Woody, who was the main toy for Andy, what is going to happen if he's not the main toy for someone else? And sure, that's probably going to give him an emotional trauma, you know? And it was really interesting watching his connections with Bo. Bo being this, like, you know, hardened, you know, I don't need a girl kind of thing, where I'm not really committed to anyone except for myself. And sure, it wasn't never to the point of it was annoying, which I think honestly she was probably the best female protagonist we've had in, like, you know, past 5 years or so. I don't know. I like the lead it too from Battle Joel. But anyways, and so it's really interesting to just watch her, you know, kind of be so, you know, kind of flawed, which is a good part. And then she has interesting connections with Woody because there's obviously they have really good chemistry in this movie and it feels real. And then on top of that, they both have two fundamentally varying, you know, belief systems in terms of being a toy. And then on top of that, both of them are a little flawed. And so it's really interesting watching them come together and kind of meet in the middle. I think there is a villain in this, which is probably the weakest part of this movie. But the villain is actually interesting and actually is not even really a villain, right? Which I think is, that's a good plus. Like, Lotso is an amazing villain. I'm like, sure, he's kind of the same as the villain from 2, but there's just this one moment where he becomes incredibly interesting. But unlike him, the new villain kind of is not really evil. Like, she has potential to have become evil, but she just doesn't really. And I think that that's a good direction to take it, because we haven't really seen that from any of the villains, and so that's a really smart play on that. Other than that, I think that this movie's pretty good. There are 2 characters which are awful. They're like these weird plush toys, and they're trying to be the comedic relief, but they have only really like one good joke in the whole movie, and it's the joke where, you know, they're like, all right, we should do this, and they just try and jump the grandma. I thought that was super funny, especially the last one where it's super like, you know, like jazz playing, and she's goes back to her house and she relaxes and she's like, you know, just taking a peaceful moment, and then all of a sudden they jump him. I think that was really funny. Yeah, they're definitely the worst part of the movie though. But I mean, other than that, this movie was really good. I think it was totally unnecessary, but other than that, I think it was really good. And I think that Woody leaving was definitely appropriate, if not completely necessary, because, I mean, of course he would leave, because the entire movie was about him, you know, coming to be satisfied with his lot, that he had his time and now he can grow and be something new and something different, which made sense. But I really liked this movie. I think that the first act was fantastic. I really liked the second act. I think the third act was a little weak. I think the very ending, how it all got resolved, was a little weak. Oh, I also think a big problem with this movie was, Bo, who's literally just Furiosa, but Fury Bo, pretty much, she has this moment of like resolve where she is like, hey, maybe Woody is kind of right about some things, you know? But it literally lasts like 5 seconds. It's literally, it takes her no time at all to actually be like, oh yeah, she's right. Because, I mean, it's a kid's movie, so the plot has to progress. But I'm like, wouldn't it have been interesting if she just had like an actual conversation with someone? Like, she's literally having this conversation, it lasts like 30 seconds with this little toy, and she's like, blah, 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 blah. And that's an interesting encounter, but it only lasts for 2 seconds. And then it's over. And then also at the beginning, she doesn't want to help Woody. And then all of a sudden, after she talks about, you know, he talks about her kid from a long time ago, which is a really good encounter. It's just super small. It's like, oh, okay, so pretty much Bo's character is completely easily convinced. I mean, it's kind of like, that's at least how it seems like. You know, it just seems like Furious is just kind of like faking the coolness, you know, some of the times. But she's a really good character most of the time. But Woody's the best character, and Woody's definitely the reason that this series has gone so far, and they really respect him as a character for the most part. There's like there's this one part where he just stupidly runs into the rescue trying to do something, and he's an idiot, and then everyone kind of just bullies him for it afterwards, and I didn't appreciate that. Like, it didn't feel unlike Woody, so that's why I wasn't super unhappy with it, but it kind of felt weird for Woody. But yeah, that's all right. That's my review. I'm gonna try and start making more reviews. I don't even know if anyone watches these. If you don't watch these, that's okay. Next thing I'm probably gonna review. How about I do it right now? The thing I'm gonna review is Men in Black International. I'm gonna give you a hint. It's terrible, and that's the end.